sign that said "Wash your hands," and a sign that said.
Because we all need to know where those rooms
And
are.
so when we were looking for houses, we would look at houses, and I'm like, Ian, this is one of your houses, because they had signs everywhere.
I feel like we've got signs here too.
Yeah, you got signs. You're an Ian house.
This kitchen is for dancing. That's my favorite sign that we have that no one can see, by the way, right now.
Yeah.
And by the way, welcome to the Collective Good podcast.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Thank
We've
you.
already started. So
we have. Okay, here we go.
I like your story though. So you literally just moved?
We just literally 2 weeks ago moved to Granville, Ohio.
Okay, tell me that story because I'm curious.
Well, first of all, I've been in Columbus, Ohio since 1999.
Okay.
And
so that's not where you grew up?
I grew up in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay, cool.
But I've been in Columbus longer than I've been in Philadelphia, which is wild to think about.
Huh.
And I'm a city guy, and now I'm a country guy. Country boy. I'm a country boy.
Yeah.
But
okay, so
we're
you
closer
moved to
family.
Granville.
We're closer to Ian's family, my husband's family. And we wanted to try to find a space that had a little more land, and we have a child. And so we wanted to try to experience something different with her.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. So where in Granville? You say you're out, you got some land?
We are near the downtown.
Okay.
The village is what they call it.
Yeah.
The
Which
village
is so
what
charming.
we call it. We're literally like 5-minute walk, but it's called Berg Street.
Oh yeah, I know right where that is.
You know where that is?
Yeah.
And so we're right like near Denison University, and we found this house that was built in 1928.
Wow.
And I think that's kind of neat that like it's right before the Great Depression. So I just think about that moment in time, and it has a lot of history, a lot of previous owners that did some beautiful things to this home, and it's cool. 3 acres. We have deer that sleep. Our front yard is their hotel. That's
No
where
way.
That's where they spend the night.
I love that.
My 9-pound Pomeranian. I always forget they're out there. I let my dog out, and she goes right for them.
Oh,
yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
As
grew
long
up,
as they run and don't try to stomp on her, it's fun. Yeah. Yeah.
that would be a little terrifying. All right, so let's go back to your origin story. So you said you were you born in Philadelphia?
I was born in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up there.
Okay. What was life like for you growing up in Philly? Were you in the city or were you
Suburbs?
Said,
yeah.
suburbs.
So like kind of like the Bexley of Columbus.
Okay.
Right.
So
Lower
nice.
Marion.
All right.
Very, predominantly Jewish community, middle, upper class, good education, all of the it was a good area to grow up in, right? And that's where I grew up.
So did you go to public school or what was school like for you?
Yeah, I went to all public schools.
Yeah.
Good school district, and spent the first 18 years of my life there with my parents and my siblings. And
so what in the world brought you to Columbus?
Yeah. So like on the outside, that growing up looks wonderful, right? Like 2 parents and 3 siblings and lots of opportunity. But there's also like a lot of pain back then. And I faced a lot of pain and struggles. And I joked with someone recently. Someone said to me, someone Monica Day, said to me, Matt, you look good. And my response to her was, well, it takes 3 therapists. I have 3 therapists. 3 therapists.
Yeah.
I've got 2 shaman.
Amen.
I got a Japanese acupuncturist. I have got an executive coach.
Yeah.
Right? I have all these things. I'm like, that's what it takes. Ha, ha, ha. And I said to one of the therapists the next day, I told her that story thinking that she would laugh. And she goes, good job avoiding the comment. Good job deflecting. I was like, you're right. And long story short, Ryan, what my therapist helped me realize is that's what it takes for that child to heal.
Yeah.
Right. And so to answer your question, what brought me to Columbus, I was looking for escape.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anybody in Columbus. And I visited a lot of schools across the country when I was looking at colleges, and I decided on Ohio State. Yeah. So one college I did not visit is the one college I went to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that sounds hard. I can hear the pain in your voice.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that experience, or do you just want to talk about the positive stuff after that?
Do I want to talk about rainbows and bunny rabbits, or do I want to talk about thunderstorms? Whatever you want to talk about. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm curious. I'm a curious person by nature.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what that pain was. Like, what was it that was so hurtful?
Um, it's a good question. Just a lot of trauma inflicted upon my family and then inflicted upon me. To give you an example, my grandfather, when I was 3 years old, just a few days before my third birthday, he was murdered.
Oh my God.
And that is something 1983, and that is something that my family internalized. Like my mother, her
Yeah,
father,
I
right,
can't imagine.
never talked about it. But these things that we
Wow.
don't talk about, you know this, if you don't talk about it, if you don't process it, it comes out in other ways.
Yeah.
Anger, right? One way. And so I grew up knowing that this horrible thing happened, but we don't talk about this horrible thing.
Mm,
And over the past few years, I've had conversations with my mother about it. And her comment to me was like, "You were 3 years old. That didn't affect you. How did that affect you?" I'm like, "Well, if it affects
oh,
you, it affects me."
right.
Right. Or like my parents went through a horrible bankruptcy when I was a kid.
Mm,
And there were a lot of smoke and mirrors, if you will, because we tried to keep up this facade that everything's okay in this wonderful neighborhood when really my parents were trying so hard to hold on to the house. And there was a lot of friction,
yeah.
arguments, right, in the household, and they wouldn't talk to me because I was too young. You have kids, you know this. If you don't talk about it, the kids still see it,
Right.
and then they have to figure out how to process it. So there was a lot of me trying to figure out how to navigate these really large, complex things that were happening around me, but
Mm,
then also to me, right? Like there was, I dealt with sexual abuse, for example.
mm,
And I didn't even know that's what was happening to me until recently when I went into therapy and I was able to name these things.
yeah.
And so I'm 44 now, but I spent more than 3 decades of my life navigating life, not really understanding why I was making the decisions that I was.
Yeah.
Like drinking a lot when I'm in my 20s was to escape, not focus on the things that deep down my insecurities.
Right.
And so over the past few years, I've been working on acquiring the tools that will help me
Mm.
unravel all of this and start the process of healing.
What has therapy meant to you in that journey?
Uh, I mean, it makes me teary eyed. It's saved my life.
Yeah.
It's absolutely saved my life. It's made me become more vulnerable with myself, which means I become more vulnerable with the people around me.
Yeah.
It allows me to have better conversations with my partner. It allows even my dog, the way I show up with my dog.
Huh.
I used to get frustrated with her because she's outside too long going to the bathroom. Like, come on, let's go inside.
Yeah.
Go, 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 right?
Mhm.
And therapy and meditation, mindfulness has helped me be more present and realize like this dog is doing what dogs do.
Mm.
And why not be present with her and love on her rather than try to get her to live in my life and
Yeah.
and surrender to what I want her to do.
Hmm.
And so it's just allowed me to be more present with every single living being around me, including myself.
I mean, that sounds profound, and it sounds like you're saying that there was a lot of change there. What has that change felt like?
Hmm. What has that change felt like? Joy, happiness.
Hmm.
Like my default for the longest time has been to be miserable
Hmm.
and
Which
and
is surprising because you've never come across as a miserable person, but that's how
yeah,
you felt on the inside.
and on the inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by working on healing, like I think at our core, we are all the same. We are all brothers and sisters. We
Mhm.
are all love and light, but as human beings, put masks on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Done
How
that
do
a
we take
lot.
those masks off and show our true authentic selves to ourselves, but then to other people? And so the more I've been able to do that, the more I'm able to show up. I mean, seriously, like Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's.
Amen. Trader Joe's is great.
I literally schedule the time I go there based on people's schedules that work there. And there is like a gentleman that works on Sunday mornings, former high school drama teacher, retired now. And I've built a relationship with him. And he's not the Trader Joe's employee. Yes, he is a Trader Joe's employee, but it's not like he's below me or whatever. He is on the same level as me, right?
Mm.
And we have these great conversations and share joy together. And like he went to New York for I think the first time in a long time, and he sent me photos from Times Square.
That's
The guy
awesome.
that works at Trader Joe's. It's just meeting people where they're at and seeing people, and I've been able to do more of that, which brings me the joy and the happiness.
That's beautiful. I love that. Um, We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I want to
Okay.
go back and talk about your first experience here in Columbus.
Mm.
So you came to Ohio State,
Yes.
and I was stalking on your LinkedIn, and we actually were at Ohio State at the same time for I think 2 years. I
Okay.
graduated a couple years older than or before you did, but that was to me, looking back, like an idyllic time to
Yeah.
be in college. It was like the almost the end of an era. It was right before my first cell phone. I didn't get until I think I was in my junior year of college, and it was like a little brick phone or whatever. Like life was very different, but it was about to get extremely
Yeah.
different from a communication standpoint. I'm curious what your experience was like at Ohio State and what you
Yeah.
look back on from a memory perspective.
I mean, it was a great experience. It was hard in the beginning because I was an outsider. My
Yeah.
two roommates my freshman year, everyone was essentially from Ohio,
Okay.
and my roommates grew up together. So there were already like built-in cliques.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for me to really integrate that first year, and that was difficult,
Hmm.
but also sticking with it was, to your point, to your question, was what really helped build me
Yeah.
and change me, that perseverance, if you will. And then I was able to start forging relationships, and yes, Ohio State's so big, but really it's small when you think about it, because like if you're in the business school, that's one section of it,
Yeah.
and you can build a community there.
Yeah.
And so and also just getting out of my comfort zone. That change, people love to say that they love change, but change is also really hard,
Mm.
and will challenge you. But I think it's really important if we're going to grow.
Where did you find your niche at Ohio State? Because I know, like, I feel like I
Yeah.
resonate with what you're saying, that it feels smaller because of the sort of smaller, tight knit
Yeah.
communities within the university. Were you able to find something like that that you really latched onto, or what was it
Yeah,
that?
I mean, my studies, right? So like classmates and study groups. My majors were I did a double major, marketing and political science,
Okay,
and so like for example, I was in the John Glenn fellowship program that took me to DC with a group of people, and those became
sweet.
really close friends, and that was a great experience, and I worked a lot. I always worked, even when I was in, God, I think middle school. When I was 14, I started working at McDonald's.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Nice.
And I was a manager of a Boston market in high school. Like I didn't do the sports thing. Um, I wasn't comfortable with sports, but I always worked,
Hmm.
and I worked through college. And so I built relationships with my coworkers.
Where'd you work in college?
I knew you were going to ask that. I mean, I worked at, now it's coming back to me, Banana Republic at Easton when I was
Yes.
there. And
Man,
I
I
met
loved
some,
Banana Republic.
yeah, yeah. I was good at it. I enjoyed it a lot. I
I
loved the
probably bought
people.
clothes from you.
Probably
Was that at Easton?
at Easton. Yeah. And so I had great colleagues there. I loved retail. I loved retail management. I worked a call center on the Ohio State campus at one point, and that was fun.
For the university?
No, it was some guy. It was like something with refinancing mortgages.
Huh.
He had it right across the street on High Street from the
Nice.
campus. Yeah. So a bunch of different jobs, but Banana was the one that I did the longest and really enjoyed. Met really good people
Yeah. And got great clothes.
and got great clothes. And what I love about that is you meet people at all different walks of life, right? Like
Yeah.
there were college students like me, there were managers like this is their career, and
Right.
they were giving everything to it. And we were all intersecting in this one space and working together to create a great experience for customers
Yeah.
and each other.
And so eventually, I know that I saw on your resume that you
Yeah.
worked at Abercrombie.
Yeah.
Was there something between there? Like, where did you go right after school?
Yeah. So when I graduated from college, I went to a market research firm. It was called Retail Forward.
Okay.
It's been purchased. I think it's part of like PricewaterhouseCooper now.
Oh, nice.
So I did market research for them for about a year. I actually got fired from that job.
You did?
I did.
Oh, no.
I got fired from my first job. I was, I was young 20s.
Yeah.
I came out a few years earlier, and I was living what I thought was my best life. And I was going out a lot. I was really focused on like just enjoying life. And I didn't take that job seriously enough, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
And so it lasted a year.
Hmm.
And it actually was one of the greatest lessons to be fired from my first job. It was one of the hardest.
Hmm. What did you learn from that?
That's a great question. I mean, I learned that, as I think back to it, that my priorities weren't the right priorities to have.
Hmm.
Right? Because I remember even after getting fired, what did I do? I went to the club.
Hmm.
And that's not where I should be. Right? Like, I wasn't taking life seriously.
Okay.
But again, a lot of that was because of the pain from
Right.
years ago that I wasn't processing.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Yeah. And you've made that connection since in therapy?
Absolutely. Therapy, mindfulness.
Yeah. So after that, what'd you do?
So before that job, I applied for a job in Minneapolis with Target, and they offered me a job, before I accepted the consulting job. And so after I was fired, I reached out to Target, and they flew me out, and they actually offered me another job.
Nice.
And at that same time, Abercrombie came to the table and offered me a job. And I love the idea of going to Minneapolis, but also I wasn't ready to leave Columbus. There's something really special about Columbus and the people in Columbus. And I started to really build a community here. I came here not knowing anyone, and I really started to forge these relationships that were deep and meaningful. And I knew that was important. And I just wasn't ready to leave. And so I said, thank you, Target, but I'm going to go with Abercrombie.
Well, think about how much different your life would be
Yeah.
if you would have taken that and you weren't here in Columbus.
I would have a lot more jackets like thick winter jackets.
I love Minneapolis, by
Yeah.
the way. It's a really cool city.
Yeah,
I
it's a
can
great
understand
city.
the appeal of going there. But
Yeah.
so when were you at Abercrombie?
2004, 2005 till 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So sort of in the thick of when the documentary that came out on Netflix was.
Those are all the people I worked with.
So okay. So did you watch that?
Yeah.
What did that feel like to watch that documentary?
I mean, it's a great question. It was hard.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of good things that happened at Abercrombie, and
Sure.
and
It's great for our community. Yeah.
Great for our community. Young, like I was a young 20-something person, given a lot of responsibility. Got to travel the country, do market research, report.
And you all
back.
were like literally owning the world. Like that Abercrombie was it.
Abercrombie was it.
Yeah.
And so that, there was a lot of good stuff there, but then there's also a lot of darkness, right? Like I remember they used to sponsor a party downtown called Young, Single, and Rich.
Wow.
Like
How
that's
about
just,
that?
yeah, that was the culture. That was the culture.
But that's what they wanted, right?
That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted. And in a lot of ways that could be really appealing. They paid you a lot of money, great benefits, there are a lot of trappings, if you will. And so there's a lot to unpack there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it's a corporation, and for people who care about retail and customer experiences, like there was a lot of opportunity there,
Right.
to apply your skills. And good people, right? Like there are a lot of good people. Yes, there were aspects of it, and the former CEO has gotten in a lot of trouble for some of his behavior. There are other aspects of it that were really good and that I'm really grateful. There would not be a Besa if not for my experience at Abercrombie.
That's cool. Why do you say that?
I mean, I learned so much about how to engage with people, colleagues, how to lead teams.
What was your
right?
role there?
I did market research.
Okay.
So helping figure out price, the price analysis of how much should jeans be, upcoming trends, doing tests of different products, going around the country, talking to customers, talking to employees, reporting back to leadership about, what's coming down the pipeline, if you will. It was a great experience. And I love market research. The thing for me is I could never fall in love with what I was researching, the jeans and the flip-flops. Like that wasn't my jam.
Yeah.
And so there was a disconnect, if you will.
Okay.
And I was in a space that wasn't the right space for me. And that's what I needed to figure out. But those 5 years, to answer your question, I mean, you worked crazy hours
So
I
that's
did.
real. It was like just like always there.
There were days where I would leave my home in Victorian Village and it was dark because it was early. I would go to Abercrombie, I would work all day, and when I would leave, it was dark because I missed the sun the entire day.
Wow.
And then like during the recession, our team, which in total was like maybe 6 or 7 people, went down to 2 people.
Oh.
And so they said, we're going to reduce your work load.
Yeah, no, that didn't happen.
That didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like I got fired from my first job because I didn't take it seriously.
Yeah.
Here I learned how to be a really effective, diligent worker, where to focus. I learned things about like pendulums. Like I think about all the time that a pendulum swings, like things are I'm trying to think of a good example, but sometimes we think things like you do marketing. There's too much copy on this page. We got to reduce the copy. We've got to create more white space on the page.
Mm-hmm.
But then we swing the pendulum too far the other way, and now there's just too little copy.
Yeah, not enough information.
How do we get into the center? And so pendulums always swing too far right, too far left. Even in our society, right? Like you think about the racial awakening that happened in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and the pendulum swung really far one way and now it's swinging really far the other way.
Yep.
How do we not allow that to happen? How do we find that center balance? And so the experience at Abercrombie helped a lot with that. We talked about pendulum swinging all the time as it relates to clothes, but I think that relates to pretty much anything in my life.
Interesting.
Also how to treat people, right? Like there were a lot of dedicated, hardworking people at Abercrombie that treated people with respect, but then there were examples and literally lawsuits in
Right.
terms of how not to treat people. So when I think about the culture at Besa, where I work now, I think about how do I want to show up and how do I not want to show up?
All right. So you've brought up Besa. Let's talk about that. Where was the sort of impetus for that? What inspired you? You said that your experience at Abercrombie helped, but what else? And tell us about what it is and what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So Besa is a Columbus-based nonprofit. Everything we do is civic engagement, community connection, and at its core, volunteerism. How do we help people learn about needs in this community and then activate around those needs? I fully believe that, yes, there are a lot of challenges in this community and in this state and in this country and in this world. And the greatest opportunity to address those challenges is getting more people around the table. And that can be, housing, that can be food insecurity, that can be loneliness, seniors, right?
Yeah.
How do we help educate community members around these challenges that we face as a community, and then give them easy ways to plug in and learn about them by serving others? And so we launched in 2012 with this whole idea of how to make it easier for people to connect with their community. We had 56 volunteers give back a couple hundred hours of service. One of those projects, the first project, was at this place called Ronald McDonald House of Central Ohio. I think we painted their second floor.
Did you? Okay, I remember that. Yeah.
There's a photo in our office. I just saw it on the wall from the first volunteer group that was
and
there.
The first one was at the house?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
cool.
Cool.
And what's cool is a lot of people in that photo are still engaged as donors, as volunteers, as board members.
Yeah.
So that was the first project. And since then, we've done about 13,000 projects.
Dang.
Tens of thousands of volunteers. Like people have shown up in these powerful ways to support this community. Just the other day, I was at a nonprofit called Leveling the Playing Field.
Oh, yeah. Super cool.
Super cool.
Wait, I saw pictures. You guys posted pictures with the folks from NBC4.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
And so this is a nonprofit that gets sporting equipment to students and coaches and schools that don't have access to sporting equipment.
Yeah.
They're a team of one right now in Columbus. We bring them so many volunteers so that they can expand their capacity to do more good work.
That's amazing.
And I think about the Ronald McDonald House, right? Like when we did that first project, Ryan, I think there were like maybe 12, 13 staff members there. And I think of the Ronald McDonald House as like the Hilton downtown, like a hotel. And if the Hilton only had 13 staff members, like they would crumble.
Wild. Yeah,
it's all volunteers.
Right.
That are helping really ensure that the families are taken care of. To support the staff that are doing the day in and day out work.
So from a practical standpoint, what exactly are you doing on a day-to-day basis? So you're obviously coordinating volunteers, but what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So a couple things. One is we are building relationships with nonprofits.
Okay.
So this year we'll work with 200 nonprofits.
Great.
And it's going to a nonprofit and not saying you have this challenge and we can help you. It's getting curious. It's building trust. Like, what are you trying to do here? What are you doing? What are some of the challenges or pain points that you have? And then figuring out, is there an opportunity for Besa to support with resources, be it volunteers, supply drives, exposure. So, you mentioned NBC4. We have this great partnership with NBC4 where every year we are highlighting every season, Summer of Giving, and it's called Season of Giving. Nonprofit partners and opportunities to volunteer with those nonprofit partners. And so to answer your question, we are building relationships with nonprofits. We are understanding where are those pain points, and then we're building programming opportunities for volunteers to come to the doors, learn about the nonprofits and what they're doing, and then activate within those nonprofits.
Is it hard to get people to sign up to volunteer, or what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, so right now nationally, we are at the lowest rates for volunteerism across the country.
No way.
Yeah, since the government started collecting this data 30 years ago.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, and in Ohio,
Right now, the lowest ever?
lowest ever,
That's kind of surprising to me.
and in Ohio it's double digits. The reason why, I mean, the pandemic definitely supercharged it, but it was starting before the pandemic. A lot of different trends happening, right? Like, so for example, people getting married later in life and having children later in life. Young married couples with children typically volunteer. And so now that people are getting married later in life and having children later in life, priorities shift. There's not enough time to volunteer. That's one example of, trends that are changing and affecting volunteer rates. There are a lot of reasons why volunteer rates have declined, even during the pandemic, right? A lot of companies that would go out and volunteer, they couldn't volunteer during the pandemic. They couldn't send their employees home and say, oh, by the way, go out and volunteer. And so there are a lot of contributing factors. You think about the pandemic, a lot of nonprofits either laid off or reassigned volunteer managers. And so nonprofits need to rebuild their volunteer program. Same thing with companies. Companies reallocated their philanthropy department, their volunteer department. And so, a company like Big Lots has one of the most robust volunteer programs pre-pandemic. And then it went to pretty much zero during the pandemic, and now they are working to rebuild that, and they are rebuilding it.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of companies out there that now is the time that they're trying to invest those resources to rebuild programs that they spent years building in the first place.
Yeah. So does it feel like volunteerism was really harmed by COVID, and now there's some work to still be done?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the greatest thing though is at the height of the pandemic, we got 14,000 people out to the front line.
Wow.
And, I think about a food pantry that the halls are really narrow. You can't social distance. There is literally no social distancing.
Yeah.
This was at a time that we weren't wearing face masks because the face masks had to go to the front line staff, the nurses, the doctors. And so here are volunteers literally putting their lives on the line for other people. I mean, what a beautiful reflection of humanity.
Very generous.
Very generous.
Yeah,
And
you see a lot of generosity, don't you? How
absolutely.
has that impacted your life?
What is the purpose of life if not to serve others and to show up for others? I mean, the human experience to me, we're all, like I said before, I believe we're all brothers and sisters. We're all connected. And my trauma, my pain, my suffering, while the story might be different, we all have pain, we all have trauma, we all have suffering. And so how do we see other people and meet people where they are at? And so like one of my favorite stories is at the Van Buren shelter, the homeless shelter in Franklinton. On Valentine's Day, we wrap the families in a blanket of love. And what I mean by that is we have this huge meal, we have kids' activities. One year we had a family portrait photographer come out and take family portraits.
Oh, sweet.
And the next day she dropped off the photos, and they were mothers saying, I've never had a photo of my family.
That's awesome.
We give out like 400 roses on that day. Every mother Every employee there gets a rose. This past year, every man, I didn't realize this, men want roses too. And so the men's shelter, like they were so happy to get roses.
That's
But
cool.
one year I was there and I was the guy passing out the roses, and I was back like 2 weeks later. And there was a woman there, and she runs up to me and she goes, "Rose boy, Rose boy." I'm like, "What is she talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, because I passed out the
Rose boy.
roses." And she shared this story with me, talking about our common humanity. She shared that the day before Valentine's Day, her house, her home burned down,
Mm.
and she had nowhere to go. She didn't have a safety net. And so she ended up at the Van Buren shelter.
Wow.
And she was at her lowest point. She was suffering, right?
Yeah.
And at that same moment, there's a volunteer with a smile and a rose, and she knew in that moment she's going to be okay.
Hmm.
And she's sharing this story with me, and then she shows me the keys to the apartment that she's about to move into. This is, again, 2 weeks later after
Beautiful.
Valentine's Day, right? But it's just meeting people where they're at. It's not judging people. It's getting curious. It's seeing them. And I think that's when possibilities open up for us to grow as human beings together.
Yeah, those small gestures make a big difference, don't they?
To me, they're everything. We're so busy. And that's part of it, right? Like, I'm go, go, go. And what I love about my mindfulness practice is, I mean, years ago, my therapist said to me, "I just want you to meditate for 60 seconds. And I couldn't do it. I was like, "I can't meditate." She's like, "Do it for 10 seconds. I couldn't do that. 10 seconds. I couldn't just focus on my breath. And now I could, I'm about to go to a retreat where all you do is from morning to night is pretty much meditate.
Wow.
And I realized that my body wouldn't let me slow down, because if you slow down, you're just with your breathing. All of those things that I've been burying for many years will start coming to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering that I would have to process. And so, like, that's why I couldn't meditate for 60 seconds. But if I'm not processing it, I'm not working through it, I'm not living my authentic life. I'm not able to show up with you or anyone else.
Yeah, I've had a very similar experience. It was unfortunately a divorce in 2018 that kind of shattered that mask that you talked about. And I went through a tremendous amount of pain and therapy that helped me to process what was going on presently, but also like what in my past has caused this pain that's causing me to wear these masks or whatever. And the thing that, my therapist helped me tremendously, but I went through EMDR.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that?
I'm in it right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
So that is one of the most surreal, fascinating experiences I ever went through. And if people aren't familiar with EMDR, look it up. It's the experience for me was buzzers.
Yes.
So I don't know if that's what you're using, but it's literally just a back and forth. You hold these buzzers, and I had my eyes closed, and my therapist would ask, "Okay, let's talk about what's causing you pain. What comes to mind?" And then I would just either say it out loud or just think about it, and then these buzzers would go off, and somehow that helped me to bring to the surface those painful memories, and it helped me to process them and put them in their rightful place, rather than ignoring them.
Yeah.
To help sort of accept them, that this is part of my story, it's part of my journey. I don't need to be afraid of it anymore, and then it helped give a framework to me of a different understanding of what that means for me now in the present. So you're going through EMDR right now. What has your experience been like with that?
So it's interesting because, like I mentioned earlier, I can't. It's strange to say. I literally have 3 therapists. I have my.
I don't think that's strange. I think it's great.
I'm grateful. I really am grateful that I have access to these resources.
Yeah.
It makes me teary-eyed because they all support me and allow me to grow.
Yeah.
But I have my individual therapist that I've been with for 5 years. I was in a nonprofit leadership program called Vistage. And we all had to share our life stories, and people were sharing these beautiful stories about their life for like 30 minutes. And I shared mine over like 2 minutes. was like, why can't I share my story? And then what I realized is I don't understand my own story. So how can I express it to other people?
Wow.
And I sat down with a mentor of mine, Brett Kaufman.
Yeah.
And I said, Brett, I think I need like an individual coach. And he's like, why? And I explained to him why. And he's like, you don't need a coach. You need a therapist. And so that's when I started going into therapy. And like I said, like that's
Well,
really
thank God he
saved
said
my
that.
life. Yeah. And so I have my individual therapist. I have a couples therapist. And then I started with this therapy. And to answer your question, what she focuses on is the nervous system.
Yeah.
And that our nervous system, right? Like we want to be in this peaceful state, calm state, but there's so much either stimulation, trauma, whatever it is that jolts us out of it and into fight or flight. And so far my experience has been really understanding what gets me out of that peaceful state and then what does it take to get back. And sometimes what it takes to get back is like, right now, if I start crying, right? I'm not going to, I promise. But if I
You
started
can cry.
crying,
It's okay.
if I start crying, I'm sad. But then I feel embarrassment because I'm crying in front of you. I'm crying on video, right? And so the embarrassment stops my crying. But what it also stops is me feeling sad and working through that sadness.
Yeah.
And what the EMDR does is allows me to realize like there are two emotions going on there, the sadness, the embarrassment, and to really focus on the sadness and really take the sadness all the way through to process it, because sometimes I'm not able to process it. And then my nervous system is shot because I'm not fully working through those emotions.
Wow.
And yeah, I agree. Like the clicking is, you're just clicking.
It's fascinating to me. It sounds made up. It sounds ridiculous, really.
Yeah.
Like these buzzers are going to vibrate and somehow that's going to help you. But I'm telling you, it literally reshaped my mind.
It's almost like rewiring in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, mental health, right? Like God bless us for being able to talk about these things. Like my mother literally never talked about what happened to her in 1983 until 2 years ago.
Yeah. Wow.
Like her and her sister came together one night when I was home and we talked about this. And I was like, it sounds like you guys never have talked about this before, the loss of your father. And like, no, why would we? It was horrible.
Oh my gosh.
They
I can't
held
even
it
imagine.
in for 40 years.
I can't even imagine that. 40 years.
40 years, my mother held it in and didn't have the tools
Yeah.
that I think, that I have access to
Yeah.
be able to talk about these things and process them and understand how they affect. My mother said the most amazing thing to me. I don't think she would mind me sharing. I mean, she's 80 and she recently went into therapy. Think about that for a second. She's in her 70s. She went into therapy.
It's brave. That's brave.
Yeah. It's
mean,
incredible.
really.
It's
Yes.
incredible.
Good for her.
And she recently said to me, Matt, I was with my sister, my aunt, her sister. I was with my sister and I realized there's so many, we're so similar and it's all tied to our youth.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating? I'm like, of course. Yes, it is fascinating. Yes, that is it. Isn't it amazing that you discovered that and you discovered that before your deathbed? And she starts laughing. She's like, yeah, better late than never. I'm like, exactly, right? Like it's never too late to start learning, growing, evolving. And I'm so grateful. My mother is, to your point, is being brave to go on this journey for self-exploration and understanding her own story and how that impacts not just her, but her children.
You mentioned earlier your family, Ian and your child.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Ian? What's that story?
We've been together now almost 19 years.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Good for you.
yeah. We met at a bar on a Sunday night. I tried to friend him on MySpace,
Yes.
and he ignored it. He refused it, and for some reason, we finally connected and developed a friendship, and that friendship grew into something much more.
It's awesome.
And the funny thing is, once we started dating, Halloween was starting to come around. He used to love Halloween. He would dress up as like Posh Spice.
Okay.
Like he took it seriously.
Nice.
And so the first time that we're dating, Halloween's coming around and he's like, yeah, this is important to me. Last year I dressed up as Paris Hilton. I'm like, wait a second. I actually met you when you were Paris Hilton. He was outside of a bar dressed as Paris Hilton. He had this Louis Vuitton bag with a real life Chihuahua in it. Chihuahua's name was Itty Bits. And I tried to say hi to him, and he didn't give me the time of day.
That hurts.
It hurts. But so we met. I met him before we really met. But yeah, we've been together almost 19 years, and I'm incredibly grateful for that relationship.
Yeah. What has the journey of adopting a child been like for you?
It's one of the most remarkable experiences of my entire life.
Yeah. Why?
I knew I had a lot of love to invest in a child. And Ian knew he had a lot of love to invest in a child. And so we've talked about children for a while. It was delayed for a number of different reasons. Like we had relatives that were in their 90s that we were their end of life caretakers. And so we had to focus there, for example. And then the pandemic happened. But things happen when they should. I believe we are
Amen.
exactly where we should be.
Yeah.
And so it's just the moment this child came into my life, the entire experience, like even the experience, we got a call on a Monday that we were matched. And we were going through this process for a year and a half, and there was no matching happening. Basically what happens, it's like online dating where you're swipe, but the birth mother is swiping and she likes this couple or this individual. She says, okay, let's meet, right? We weren't getting any birth moms swiping
for a year and a half.
For a year and a half. And this adoption,
that must have felt like eternity.
Well, and this adoption agency said, the national average to get a newborn at that time was like 2 years. They prided themselves that their average was 1 year. It could be a month, it could be 5 years, but their average was 1 year. And so we're like, okay, 1 year. Well, a year and a half goes by, and she's like, guys, just be patient.
Yeah.
And we were patient. It would happen when it happens. So we get a call on a Monday. Her name is Molly at the agency, and she said, guys, you've been matched. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And she's like, look, I can't guarantee it, but I've been at this long enough. You're having a baby.
Nice.
And so she explains to us, here's the birth mom. She lives in Toledo. She doesn't know how far along she is. She thinks she's 6 months. She doesn't even know the sex of the baby. She's getting an ultrasound the following week. She would love for you to come to Toledo.
Wow.
Meet her.
So you went there for that?
You'll find out the sex of the baby and how far along she is. We're going to be in Michigan at the time on vacation, but we can go to Toledo. It's 3 hours away. So to answer your question, we're on vacation, and the following Monday we get a call. Guys, she's having cramps. Like, what does that mean? And I'm thinking she's going to have a miscarriage. She's like, I don't know. I'll call you back. Calls us back. Guys, she's going into labor.
What?
And so Ian and I are on vacation. She's like, Molly from the agency is like, yeah, she's going to labor. I'm like, okay, well, we're here with our stuff. We have our dog. Do I leave my dog here? She's like, you don't understand. Your vacation is over. Pack up your stuff, pack up your dog, get to Toledo. I'll meet you there. We'll figure it out.
Wow.
And so we met the birth mom in the hospital room for the first time.
While she's in labor?
Yeah. And what they were trying to do is they thought she was 6 months pregnant. So they were trying to keep the baby in and giving her medication to keep the baby in. So we got through the first day, and they were like, find a hotel room. They even offered the Ronald McDonald House in Toledo.
Nice.
As a opportunity for us. We ended up saying no, we'll get a hotel room and another family can have that opportunity. And we came back the next morning, and within 10 minutes, we are going into a operating room with 3 sets of doctors and all kinds of doctors and nurses, because they were thinking that we're about to have a premature baby. Okay. And the baby comes out, and the doctor looks at us and says, you have a full-term baby here. She just was not showing for the longest time.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we went from a Monday being matched to the following Monday.
I mean, this sounds like a movie. That's
to Tuesday having a baby, to Wednesday being home at 1 a.m. And I'm looking at Ian, and this baby is just crying. And I'm like, Ian, did we make an effing mistake? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And there are 2 things that are absolutely beautiful about that story that I'm so grateful for beyond the baby, Evelyn. One is the birth mom. She was 27 at the time. And I just think about her bravery and her courage to say, this is what's best, literally saying to us, this is what's best for this child, and trusting us that we are going to do right by her and this child, and literally handing us this child. That because when I was 27, I was at the club, right? Like I
Yeah.
was the depth of her wisdom and courage is something I will never take for granted.
Mm.
And then two is when we got back to Columbus, we had nothing. We only had the diapers and the formula that the hospital gave us. We didn't have a baby's room. Like we thought we were going to have months to prepare. We didn't have a baby's camera or whatever, nan it. And so that was on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, we had friends that put together an Amazon wish list of here are all the items that you need. And by Friday, this entire community rallied, and every single item on that list was in
Oh, that's awesome.
our house. And so we didn't have to worry about which camera to get. We could just focus on loving this baby.
Mm.
I wouldn't trade it for the world.
And how old is she now?
She's just over 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
How has it changed your life?
I'm grateful. I had a child later in life. How old were you when you had your children?
28
Yeah.
with the first, and I've got 4
Okay.
from 19 to 8. So
Yeah.
got a pretty wide span, but yeah, way younger than you.
Yeah. I mean, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? Like I wish I had a child when I was 28 because I'll be here longer for grandchildren, maybe great grandchildren, or my back won't hurt as much if I was 28 versus 44 holding a baby, right? But also the wisdom that comes being older. And
Right.
so I'm able to be so much more present with her and loving. I'll give you a great example. When Ian picks Evie up at the daycare, it's like she won the lottery.
Mm.
Like she goes wild. I'm not talking about the $5 scratch off. I mean, she just won the 10 million, $100 million lottery. When I pick her up, it's not like that. And there's a version of me from years ago that would be resentful, right? And then like, love me, hug me, right? And like make her feel guilty or shameful for not doing that. But this version of me is like, I love this baby. Doesn't matter how she responds to me. Doesn't change how I love her. And I'm
Good for you.
grateful for those lessons because I didn't grow up really understanding love. Like there was a lot of pain, right? And so these are things I had to learn through the way of how to show up.
Yeah.
And so how it's completely changed my life, and my entire life is. People say like it's so hard to have a child, it gets better. This stage is the hardest, or potty training. Like people made me feel so like I was so anxious about potty training. And I got a book called Oh Crap, and it's 300 pages. I'm like, oh my God, oh crap, I have to read a 300-page book.
Oh, that's extreme.
And what I realized is it's all about empowering her,
Yeah.
right? It's not about shaming her. It's about empowering her. I can do that.
Yeah.
It's such a gift to be able, and she's my greatest teacher, right? I think about the therapists I have and all the support I have. And my hope is she will have access to therapy if she needs it, but I never want her to have 3 therapists and all these other things. I want her to be able to have the love, the curiosity, the understanding, the bravery to be able to, and the support to go through life and not to have that level of resources to heal.
Well, I think credit to you that the amount of work that you're putting into that, I mean, that's a serious investment of time and energy and money and all of that.
Yeah.
It's going to pay off in breaking those bonds, and hopefully she'll have a different experience than what you've had.
It's generational, right? Like
absolutely.
generational trauma. How do you break those bonds?
It really does stick with. It's handed down to us.
Yes.
And that's hard. I'm so curious if, God willing, 30 years from now, you're sitting down with her and you're just sort of talking about your life. What do you hope she remembers?
Joy, happiness, laughter. I just had a laughing yoga teacher come to my team. And what she talked about is when we are a child, we laugh hundreds, thousands of times a day. When we're adults, I think she said the average is like 8 or 15 times a day. Yeah. And her work is how do we get us to laugh as much as we did, giggle as much.
Yeah, what a great job.
Right? What a great job. And all the benefits that go with that. But like when I throw Evie on the bed and she just giggles up a storm, like that is the best moment of my day.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question 30 years from now, that I was there, that that I was present with her
Mm,
and that I saw her.
it's beautiful. Well, you're doing amazing work in this community, not just through Besa, but just as a person. And I appreciate you and your friendship. And thank you for coming on the show. It means a lot to me. And
Thank you for inviting me.
I can't wait to see all the great things that you continue to do.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been great to be here with
Yeah,
you.
appreciate you.